This evening we will continue with our talks on Vipassana. And this evening we will continue on to the topic of Citta-Nupassana, mindful contemplation of consciousness. There's certain things that has to be clarified. As I said on the first day, from the initial instructions, the words are very important. And the instructions from the scriptures comes from early Buddhism, and they are Theravada, and they refer to experience. The first I give the example of Citta and Sati, mindfulness and consciousness. Today we talk more on the actual consciousness as a meditative experience. This contemplation is not something invented later. It appears very obviously in text like the Satipatthana Sutta talks about it and how to do it. And so to the commentaries connected with it. So let's see what happens. First, we talk about Citta. In the earliest part of the Abhidhamma, it makes clear four paramatthas, four ultimate realities. Citta, the consciousness, the cetasika, the mental state, rupa, materiality, and nibbana, the unconditioned element. These are Pali words. It took me some time to actually get a clear, very clear picture of it. First, we talk about is consciousness. It differentiates between the consciousness and the mental state. The English vocabulary doesn't have all this because they are not into Buddhist metaphysics. There are words close to it, but not close enough to give all the implications. The earliest type of English word used is mind, which is quite broad. At first I doubted it, but after a long time I said, it's not wrong. And it was like cognition. somehow you are settled with the word consciousness. And not exactly the same meaning as the English vocabulary, because it means other things, metaphysical sense. So often when I go to new places to meditate or to give a talk, I ask the people in those places, what is consciousness? Different places give different answers because they have different ideas what the mind is. Yeah? It depends on that, people work with it in different ways. But here we're trying to understand it in terms of its actual, in the real experience of it, in reality. But that's the difference. Then then it becomes universal. Language is not universal. No. Chinese is one thing. No. Chinese, I call it super language. Because of all this, they said, it's a tongue twister for the Chinese tones. So once I asked, somebody answered, that which knows the object. Yeah. Wonderful, beautiful, and direct. I say it comes right out from the books. But it does say something because it comes from the actual text. It's as simple as you can give. Consciousness is a Dhamma. There's another word which is not translatable. There are many definitions for the word Dhamma, depending on how it is used. That's why when we come to the fourth foundation, Dhammanupassana, then it has a more distinctive meaning. So generally we go down to the word consciousness. Consciousness is a Dhamma. Consciousness is a phenomena. Ordinary Dhamma means teachings. But here it means a state. The more technical definition, a state that is born by its own characteristics. You see the characteristic of harness, and that is a Dhamma, which is called the earth element. It refers to a certain phenomena that exists in the experience of reality. Yeah. It can be experienced. Whether you know it or not, it doesn't matter, it exists. But it can be known in its actuality. Consciousness is also the same thing. That which knows, that phenomena which knows, that means the knowing is citta. The knowing itself, the citta. The citta knows, and the knowing is the citta. You know, the phenomena which is that which knows the citta, the knowing itself. Now you don't talk about how you know. You're not talking about what it knows. No. Who knows? And that all doesn't come into the picture. Just the knowing. And then you're talking about the consciousness. But here is talking. When you talk, you have an idea. But the idea is not it. You experience directly. Can you experience directly the knowing? You have knowing? Of course you have knowing. So that's the consciousness. That is simplifying things. So if you watch that knowing mindfully, then you're watching consciousness. No, people make things complicated. If I know the knowing, there's two knowing. It's the eternal question. So that means there are two minds. So that is getting into concepts, thinking, analytical thinking of concepts. Then you're getting far away from the point. So sometimes I ask people, which type of answer do you want? You want a Zen answer or you want a Vipassana answer? And somebody says, I want a Zen answer. Go and meditate. A book. Vipassana answer, there are more than one ways. One way is says that you know the immediate past. No? You think about it, it's true, but it brings up more questions. It brings up more questions to that, which goes back to square one. You go and look at it and see, find out for yourself with mindfulness. So that's what I mean, but you have to start somewhere. So we start with the knowing. That's why in the first day I was saying, you take it very generally, the knowing mind, which seems to be always around, and that's the consciousness. And the noting mind and the mindfulness is mental state, cetasika. Now there is this confusion because of the noting. Please note this, please note that. Now there's a bit something missing in the English language. In the actual word used in Pali or Burmese, it means noticing. Now to note and to notice are two different things, isn't it? Right? I noticed David today. Your mind is much more clearer. I noticed. We're not David. There's nothing. I don't know anything much about David. I don't know David. The word, and probably just what I see. So noticing would be a better word, right? So when you notice something, it means you are aware of what is present at that moment. I noticed my mindfulness is much better today. I noticed the rising, falling is getting very subtle. I noticed. To say note is an instruction to ask you to notice. But in the translation somewhere, it's got lost. Because to note does not mean you're mindful, you're just labeling. And labeling is closer to what we call another mental state called perception, sanya. Sanya is like a secretary taking notes. When the boss just blah, 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 so the secretary takes down all that is said. Or the translator just follows what is said. He doesn't discriminate. He doesn't put it under a filter. Just do it like a recorder. And that is more like noting, perception, something like that. So you see the difference. So the noticing, which comes with mindfulness, is a mental state. It goes into not just knowing, but how you know. You know it in the correct way. You know it according to the reality. Or you know it in a hallucinatory way, which is not mindfulness, which is illusion. There has to be a clarity between these two, the consciousness and the mental state. In the beginning, you don't notice the difference between these two. It all comes under nama, mental phenomena, mind. And that's what happens in the beginning. In fact, you do consciousness meditation, Chittanapasana, from the very beginning, in its grosser forms. Like thinking, please not thinking. And I say, please notice, mindfully thinking. So when you're mindful, thinking passes away. Thinking will arise and pass away unless you keep putting what you go, wood to the fire. You just be aware there's this thinking process going on. But you must be mindful. You're not mindful, you're not doing. You're just saying thinking, it doesn't go away. You're not being mindful of thinking. You're not being mindful of Dhamma or consciousness or whatever. You're just making a label. So one person said, was very smart. He said, I know why when I say thinking, the thinking goes away. Because my mind is thinking of the word thinking. That is not mindfulness, just replacing it with a word. Now, when you're not thinking mindfully, that means you don't think, you're being present. When you bring present, you're not thinking. The word is one thing. Most important, you're mindful. And when you're mindful, they always give you advice. When you're not thinking, don't be aware of what you're thinking. You're aware of the thinking process. Because you know you're thinking. What you're thinking? Oh, I'm thinking of my house. My bed is so nice. My food is so nice. I can eat what I like. That is thinking of. Observe what you're thinking about. It's not the point when you say thinking, you're supposed to be watching consciousness. So look at the thinking process. And you look at the thinking process and you look at the thinking process and the mental state. The mental state arising is usually often and not unwholesome. It is kind of called the main mental factor involved is restlessness. It's like very noisy, you know. When you watch restlessness, mental state or hindrance, you watch it directly. It's like, you know, this radio, what you call, the thing, what do you call that? That static, like that. So when you watch the restlessness and the restless passes away very clearly, immediately you see very quiet. The mind is so silent and quiet. Because this restlessness is gone away. So when you watch like that, you see the difference between the restless consciousness and the peaceful consciousness, the opposite. The restless consciousness and peaceful consciousness are two total different consciousness. They're not the same. Just like, you know, there's Satipatthana Sutta, consciousness with lust, I know, you know. Consciousness without lust, you know. That means you see the difference between the two consciousness and you see the impermanence of the consciousness as a result. You know? Whereas if you know the thinking or the sleepiness, for example, thinking, sleepiness, thinking, restless, sleepiness. The restlessness and thinking will come and go, come and go. And then it comes like a wave. You use more effort, it becomes less. You don't use so much effort, it comes back, attacks you. So you're not really watching the consciousness directly. You're watching the sloth and pawpaw. The change of the variation of the intensity of the sloth and pawpaw. You're watching the mental state, not the consciousness. So you see the change in the mental state, but not clearly the change in the consciousness. And that's the difference. This is an important point. Because the important point in watching consciousness is to see the three characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and non-self in the consciousness. Okay. Now we go back to the consciousness. So one of the first things you notice is the consciousness, and you differentiate with the mental state. It's a very strange phenomenon I noticed. You see, in developed countries, Malaysia included, Malaysia is not as developed as in Europe, materially not as developed in Europe or in US. But in the mental thing, they have caught up very quickly. You know why I say that? During my early days in teaching meditation, that was around 40 years ago, quite some time. No, people in Malaysia, within 3 to 4 days, the mind goes into concentration. They can follow rising, falling, they can watch sitting, touching. 3 or 4 days. I'm talking about a beginner. They can go in. Because they don't think that much. But nowadays, they're on par with the West. They take at least 1 week. And 1 week is a critical phase. You know why? Because in 1 week, that's the critical zone, it's the danger zone. We go freaky. Your inert traumas and neurosis or psychosis start surfacing. In the early days, this psychotherapy and so on was unknown. If you go to psychotherapy or psychologist, you are labeled mad. Nobody goes. Who did they go? Where did they go? They talk about it with the grandfathers and the grandmothers. So when I told that to the West, the psychiatrists and psychologists said, Bhante, you underestimate our profession. Which is true. Anyway, but we also do that, including monks. So, we won't go into that, we'll come back to our topic. So, you have this 1 week thing, So in terms of method, I forgot one thing, I must not believe on this. So coming to the definition of consciousness, as I said, the best way is to bring you to see directly the consciousness by itself. As I said, this is Mei-Ling, and then you see Mei-Ling. I point you, this is consciousness of this consciousness, because you see it directly. So in the same way, I try to point out what is the consciousness. Not just by the word the definition, knowing that which knows in the object, but rather in the direct experience. The first way I try to tell people is we go through a simple exercise. That's what I was saying just before that. Was in the more developed societies, they are more aware of the mental state than the consciousness. When it's active, thinking, and so on. You say, what's the mind? You're thinking? Yes, that's the mind. So they understand. We talk of the knowing mind, and then it comes a bit tricky. That is because the mind is more used to the more active state. Whereas in Burma, Thailand, and so on, they know. When you talk consciousness, they know. Right? Thai, for example, is all in the culture, and I suppose also in Burma, in the language. Like Thai said, เสียใจ That means the mind that is spoiled in the best state is เสียใจ Happy ดีใจ D is good. Good mind. So the mind is always there. So you differentiate the good is being described for the mind, not the mind for the good. You talk of Cetasika mental state, then you're talking about in what way the good is in terms of the mental state you describe it. So you describe it to relate it to the mind. It's a bit different. So what I'm saying is, I'm getting to the point. Now, there are two mental states which are very close to the consciousness. I would say that there are two main pillars of the door to going into consciousness. This is the Vedana, feeling, and the one is perception. When Vedana is very clear, the mental state is clear. When Vedana is weak, the consciousness becomes clear. Suppose you wear a mask. You take out the mask and you see your face. Yeah. Similar, when the perception is clear, the mental state is clear. When the perception is weak, the consciousness stands out. So these two are very close to the consciousness. Because Vedana is a feeling, is a kind of knowing. The perception is taking notice of a marks of an object. Is it taking notice of the marks of the object? Taking note. Here in the better word is taking note. There is this thing in the object. So this is perception. Right? You know, you recognize who? You recognize somebody, tell somebody. Take notice of, let's say, somebody famous, Putin, for example. You know Putin? I've not seen him yet, but I've seen a lot of photographs of him. Pictures of him. How do you know this is Putin? Because you recognize his forehead, big forehead. You recognize his eyes, you recognize, and you know that, and then you say it's Putin. Right? This is by the face, by the marks on the face. So you say. So this is because you recognize by that. It's a kind of knowing. So from this very basic mental states, they develop into many things, many other mental states, many types of variations, and so on. So one exercise we can try to do now. I don't know whether you can get it. Not many people get it. Once I was in Malaysia teaching a retreat. I tried it on a group of people. There were around 20 people. This is supposed to cream of a group. Cream. Out 25 people get a point. 5 people. And these professors and these, old Buddhists and all these things, get to the point. Others, they get somewhere around there, but not really. But since most of you are big time practitioners, yeah, you just came up from a big long retreat, Tathagata meditations, and so you should get it. Should, somebody once said, the should word shouldn't be used. It's people pressure. Okay, you try. Now you try to close your eyes. And watch your breath. Try to make sure your feeling is neutral. You're not happy, you're not sad, just neutral feeling. I'm sure you can do that. Don't think, put away all your thoughts. Yeah. Put away even your perception of the rising falling. Don't follow rising falling. Just leave the mind completely blank without any object. Be totally present, directly facing the blankness in front of you. Like the blank mind or the blankness in front of you. It's clear that you are conscious. It's clear you are knowing something. You're knowing the blank thing in front of you. And be totally present. Can you get it? Yes. Can you get it? You
Maybe.
Can you describe it?
It is like at the back, just observing and know it.
It's blank.
But it's clear that it knows.
It's clear you know. Yeah? The knowing is there. There's the consciousness. You're looking directly at the consciousness. Can you get it? isn't it, Jennifer? Isn't it, Jennifer? Can you get it? You're looking at something, correct? A blank thing. And the blank thing is consciousness. It depends on how strong your mindfulness. Your mindfulness is strong, then the mindfulness also becomes clear. And it makes the what you see as a mental phenomena. Can you get it, Joy? No. So what were you watching? What do you think you're watching in front of you? Nothing. It means your awareness of the present is not so strong. Watching the blankness, it's like an empty state. If you don't have much mindfulness, it fades into delusion, which is just pure darkness. Can you get it, Ying? How do you describe it? That is the most direct way. You get it, this.
I got it. I think I feel like at the same time. So I'm just like, aware of blankness, and I know that I'm aware of blankness, but I'm also aware that I'm kind of creating a perception of blankness also.
Yeah, there are two processes that are going on now.
Yeah.
Which is in a way good. If you look clearer, then all the other processes start appearing inside.
Sorry?
All the other, you look it for a longer time, clearly, then you can see all the mental states and processes going on in there. And also the mental objects will come in. So what I do, sometimes I take them one step back. One way I try to bring them to watch the consciousness is watch the feeling. This is a feeling, Vedana, around the heart area. Now the feeling in the heart area is mental feeling. It has also some physical thing there. But it's more towards mental. For example, you watch the feeling in your deep in your chest. You get a feeling. Try and see. Yeah, this will be easier. Something like an emotion. Something like a mood. You get it, Joyce? You can get this easier because feeling is more towards feeling. Feeling is more gross than consciousness. You just keep it there for a longer period of time. And you begin to notice that it's more like a mood or emotion. And you go into that mood or emotion and feel it. Then you notice that this heart feeling expands as you go into it and watch it longer. Then you occupy a bigger inner space. The bigger inner space is the mind door. And the mind door is essentially consciousness. Yeah. And so when you watch the mental feeling and you watch it changing, you will sooner or later get to know the consciousness. Right? It's inside. You know the consciousness at the mind door. You know the mental states at the mind door. The third way I try to make people aware of it, develop the mindfulness of consciousness, is use the sitting touching. For example, in the early morning, the guided meditation, you feel the sensations in the body, from head to feet, feet to head. You feel the whole, after a while, you feel the whole body sensations like vibrating, like a lot of, pulsations going on. No? Sometimes not so much, sometimes more. These are bodily sensations. Yeah? They also a kind of feeling together with the elements, the processes. And now, what happens is usually awareness is on the top of the head. For more developed countries, people would think a lot. As we said, the seat of the consciousness at the heart base there. So you can forget about your head and bring your awareness down to the heart base here. Here, the awareness, the clarity and the awareness, one-pointedness is here, around the chest area. And yet you still feel all the sensations going around. This is a crowd method. So it's as if the awareness is sitting on the throne here in the center, and all your bodily sensations are like going around, running around it. Can you do that? I'm sure you can, to some extent. And that you notice that if you do that, the consciousness is like a light, awareness like a brightness in the middle of the whole mass of revolving sensations. So I give it a simile. It's like a candle flame surrounded by all those insects flying around it. Okay, something like that. So this is primarily the consciousness. And these are primarily the objects. In the beginning, because you're not so mindful, the candle flickers. When it becomes more concentrated, it steadies. And then you still watching the sensations going around. Now, what happens if your concentration becomes strong? When concentration becomes strong, the object will come to you. When your concentration is not strong, you will go towards the object. It's generally true. So what happens is, when your concentration improves, the sensations will come closer and closer and closer. And one of them will be so close that it touches the flame. Then both disappear. This is like the moth coming closer and closer to the candle. When it touch peaks, both gone taste. The flame will go off and the insect will be dead. Because it comes together, it's concurrent. The mind knows the object, they come together. You are more right to the point of the occurrence, then both arise and disappear at that very moment. That's the nature of ultimate reality. It is another way of understanding and looking and centering on the consciousness. Give you an idea of how it is. This is important because a number of issues are involved. What happens is people tend to be more attached to and identifies with the consciousness rather than the mental state. They do also the mental state, but consciousness is attached more as the permanent entity, the atta itself. That becomes a big stumbling block in vipassana, because it is a foundation of wrong view. So when you see like people who see the thinking comes and goes, yes, the thinking goes, because mind is still there. No? So the thinking can come and go, but the mind lasts forever. And so the mind is permanent. So I am the mind, essentially I am the mind. And so there's a wrong view of Sakayaditi, eternalism. This is important, is stumbling block, and important to remove this. So unless you see clearly the consciousness is really impermanent, then you see it as non-self. This is one important point. Any questions for us? Yes.
Yeah, I really like the example of when you settle into consciousness.
Yeah.
It's like the moth example, the object and the consciousness meeting the object.
Yeah.
Come together and incinerate each other immediately.
Yeah.
But the when you say like the brightness, are you talking about a literal brightness or?
No, it's a mental.
Huh?
It's a mental phenomenon.
Well, yeah. So I mean, do you mean brightness in the sense of the luminosity is illuminating the objects? So
no clarity.
Huh?
Just clarity. Just clarity.
Okay, clarity.
Just
not literally.
Not literally clarity, but being very, when it becomes very clear, you would seem that you can see it. You would seem that you can see it with your own eyes. That is becoming a visualization. And it's different. That's why the bright mind and the lights in the mind are two different things. But one produces the other. It's the natural process in the consciousness. And now we come to the practice itself. Give you a good idea of what it is. First is the first level, which is practice. This is by way of the six sense doors, salayatana. So in a way, it is Dhammanupassana. Something like that. But we're talking in terms of citta, because we were emphasizing on the consciousness. You say there are six doors: eye door, ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door, mind door. And the eye door, there's a seeing consciousness. Ear door, hearing consciousness. Nose door, smelling, tasting, touching, and the knowing consciousness. Okay, the six sense doors. So what you do is, when you know the six sense doors, you see the mind going through the six sense doors. These are the six pathways of the mind. And that's the first way, because you're following the mind. You're watching something, you follow it. You're just watching a stone, then you don't have to follow it. Just stay there and watch the stone. Some of the object is something like that. But even that is not so easy, because the mind won't stay still. So in this case, the consciousness is always changing. We say it's always moving. The consciousness does not move. Consciousness is change. Yeah, because when you say move, you get the idea it's moving from one place to another. when I walk from here to the dining hall, my mind follows me and moves also to the dining hall. Movement is a material thing. It's function of space and concept. The mind changes with the object. Somebody once asked my teacher, where is the mind? The simple answer is the mind is with the object. You know? For example, when you see something, the seeing consciousness arises together with the eye object and the eye base at the same time. It does not run from here to there. The consciousness appears at the eye door. Is there a difference? Then we think the consciousness arises from the heart base and quickly, and it goes, I see the heart base. No. But in a general understanding and description, it's okay, no? But in actuality, no. It appears and disappears. It changes. So what many teachers who teach Chittana-Pasana consciousness, that's what they do. They watch the mind running through the 6 sense doors. And when they do it properly, they realize that at every sense door, the consciousness is different. The knowing at the eye door is completely different from the knowing at the ear door. The hearing consciousness cannot see. The seeing consciousness cannot hear. Yeah. Because the object and the consciousness are together, you cannot. Sound is like a vibration that you know. So the hearing consciousness is like a vibration. No? Seeing consciousness is like light. You see light. The eye object is like a light. You see clearer, you see further. The seeing consciousness is also something like that. It's like a bright thing, things that expands. So the nature of the seeing consciousness is completely different from the hearing consciousness. Same with smelling, tasting, touching, and knowing. So when the person, at first it's not so clear, first you see that when you're seeing and hearing, they're two completely different processes. You're seeing here. So when you can see that clearly, then you can see the beginnings of the impermanence of the, rather the change of the consciousness. And then you can see one thing changing completely from one to another, then you know that it is nothing permanent is transferred over. No? That's why they talk about the difference between rebirth in Buddhism and reincarnation of Hinduism, for example. What's the difference? The difference in Buddhism is nothing permanent is transmitted from one life to another. Whereas the other one, the soul, the everlasting entity of the soul, is transmitted from one life to another. Okay? This gets into a very complicated thing. And it can be verified only by experience of insight into conditioning. Now, one thing about this method, you can say that the center of these 6 sense doors is the mind door. Without the mind door, the 6 sense doors are useless. If there's no mind door, we need to eat nothing. It must be the mind to give it some sense. So the mind is central. So what happens in the process, the natural process in the mind as a whole? It runs through the 6 sense doors, 5 sense doors, and it always comes back to the mind door. For example, if you do the meditation consciousness, for example, rising, falling, I watch rising, falling, you use rising, falling as the center of the processes because you're concentrated there. And the mind is made to stay there longer. So when you watch rising, falling, and the moment you're mindful, the moment you start thinking, and the mind runs away somewhere. And you find that somebody's coughing, immediately the mind will run to the ear door. Somebody's coughing. After that, you bring back. Suddenly you feel pain, and the mind will run to the pain. Stupid pain, why is disturbing from meditation? Anger rises, then you come back. So it revolves around this. So you have to follow the mind, and you follow it. But even you go back to the body door where concentration is built up, eventually it goes into the mind door. Because when you watch consciousness, you watch it at the mind door. You don't watch it at the body door. You watch the body consciousness, yes. But to go deep, and even you don't go deep, the mind eventually goes into the mind door. And you watch consciousness, eventually you have to go into the mind door. Okay. So in the beginning, usually they talk about the mind going to the 6 sense doors and how they react to it. You see something you like, you get attached. You see something you don't like, you get angry, and anger, craving, and you're mindful, it goes away, you get the mindfulness, then you come back. So in this way, you see the running to the sense doors is first you see the changes in the consciousness. One door and another is different. And also the reaction or the response to what you see and hear, whether you like or not, don't like, and then also you see is different. Sometimes you see what you see you like, sometimes you see you don't like, sometimes what you see you're mindful. The reaction and the response is different. So it occupies a different thought processes. So in this process, in this way, you find you are watching the mind, mental processes, and the consciousness in different way. But still, the most important part is to go into the mind door. For example, you hear something and then you don't like or you like. Now the liking and not liking is already gone into the mind door. Very fast. This one you have to explain in the thought processes, which we won't go in for now. But generally, it gives you an idea. One way is generally going to the 6 sense doors. Now, then you come to the next phase. Let's say we can follow the mind going to the 6 sense doors, the 5 sense doors, and coming back to the mind door. It's just like the dog, simile of the dog. The first phase, I call it 6 sense doors, is called walking the dog. You take the dog for a walk. When the dog goes for a walk, or say, this is a rabbit, then it runs to chase the rabbit. The while you see another dog, then you have a dog meet dog. There's a male dog and female dog, probably they start licking each other. If a male dog and male dog, they will probably start barking at each other. There's some kind of call it the natural competition among animals. So you see the reaction there as well, the same way. So after a while, he comes back home and rests. Because it's home. He gets his food there and everything. So he's back home. He's happy to be home. And this is like the mind going back to the mind door. Where is the mind door? The mind door is at heart base. And the heart base is home. So, but this one we go into a little bit later. What I'm trying to tell you is, finally you go back to the mind base, which is centered, if you want a place, it's centered around the heart. But it is the life continuum, or we say the Bhavanga Citta itself. The mind door goes back there. Usually in the first place, you don't only watch the mind. You watch all the different sense objects one together, how they relate. For example, you see, you're not seeing. Do you see the consciousness? No, you don't see the consciousness. You see the eye object, the lights. Because they're more brighter and grosser than the consciousness itself, consciousness at the background. You know you're watching, but the light is stronger. But you're used to watching the consciousness. You also can see it. That is subtle. But when you go into the mind door, then the consciousness plays the main part. This is where I said I consider the second phase where the Satipatthana, Cittanupassana comes in. Mindfulness of consciousness at the level of the four foundations of mindfulness. Because you see, at that chapter, it states clearly the objects that you use that appear in that Cittanupassana. And it's organized, no? Well organized. I'm going to extend the talk a bit longer now, if you don't mind. Now, the Cittanupassana Satipatthana talks about first, Saraga Cittanti Panjanati, Vitaraga Cittanti Panjanati, Sadosa Citta Panjanati, Vitadosa Dosa Citta Panjanati, same with Samoha and Amoha. These are the first three you see, and the three evil roots. When there's the consciousness of the last, that is with craving, he knows this is consciousness. This is the consciousness of craving. And the consciousness without craving, he knows this is a consciousness without craving. You see, the consciousness with craving. He didn't talk about the craving itself. Talk about referring to the consciousness. Consciousness is the main thing. The craving or lust, raga, is used in the adjectival form. It describes the consciousness. You know this type of consciousness is different from that consciousness because of this craving, with craving and without craving. Both are consciousness. Both you talk about consciousness. So that means the main focus of the mindfulness is the consciousness. The craving is just an attribute. Okay. Otherwise, how you know the difference between this consciousness and that consciousness? But it's different. All right? And so that's why I say. So when you watch it, consciousness, satipatthana, and you watch it as a natural phenomena, and you watch it as no craving. That means you see a very distinct between a craving consciousness and non-craving consciousness. Not between a craving consciousness which has a lot, consciousness which has a lot of craving, and a consciousness which has a little bit of craving. No, not that. The difference between a consciousness with craving and consciousness completely without craving. When you watch that, then clearly you see the cut. It's a completely different consciousness. You can see very clearly, for example, when you're angry, you're angry, and then, or you're worried, very worried, you lost one. You lost the key to the room. You locked yourself in the room. You're worried because you're just wearing your underwear. You're getting cold and you cannot go in. I don't know, open the door. You ask me, I say, I don't know how to open the door. Ask me, probably the monks know, but I won't wake them up. And so fortunately, they came and they knows what to do. So whenever he found, I can open it now. Thank goodness. So it's like a completely different mind. A mind that's very worried and a mind that's no worries is like a completely different mind. So you can see a clear change in the consciousness, just like you're a completely different person. Why? Because the mind is so used to identify themselves as a consciousness. So it's easier to see non-self with regards to the body and feelings than the consciousness. So in this way, you can see the cutting, the distinct change in the consciousness from craving and non-craving. There's no connection in between. When the whole thing disappears, the next one comes. And then you start losing hold on the idea of the permanent consciousness. It's just a starting point. Similarly, the consciousness with anger and consciousness without anger. Consciousness with delusion and consciousness without delusion. This is more subtle because delusion can be very subtle. It can be different between knowing and not knowing. You think you're not knowing anything. The consciousness still knows with delusion. So it's like you don't know, but you still know. So anyway, to see clearly, distinctly, that means you need to be able to differentiate between a little craving, anger, delusion, and completely no craving and no delusion. So the clarity should be there. This is the first part. That means you're really watching the anger. I give this example. This man was meditating, and he came with a girlfriend. You don't come with a girlfriend, you come with your husband or wife. It's essentially the same thing. So what happens is, now the girlfriend was coughing and coughing and coughing. The whole room was, you can only hear her coughing. So I said, my dear lady, I'll try to be as polite as possible. You're coughing too loud and too much, you're disturbing everybody. Yeah. You can continue meditating in your own room. For some of us, you ask us, allow us to go and meditate in our own room, we're very happy. No stress. But these people like the group, and so you cannot deny that fact. You're disturbing other people. So, okay, you can go back and you watch your coughing and you cough as much as you like. You don't feel guilty. So I send her back to the room politely. So, now what happens? Who's the boyfriend of that? My girlfriend cannot meditate and sit together with me. It's so sad. Attachment. No? Attachment. They know they shouldn't be, they know that they are not beginners. They are Buddhists, they are meditators. They know. But they can't help it. So the anger still keep brewing. Meditate properly, there's only watching anger, but the anger won't go away. No. Why? The anger goes away, comes back, goes away, comes back. Finally, he discovered why. Because he was angry that he was angry. He could see the anger, the girlfriend couldn't meditate with him. But he couldn't see that he was angry because he was angry. The moment he noticed that, immediately the anger disappeared. And it disappeared in a very dramatic way. He sees anger like a fireball, very quickly rushing and bursting out. The fire burst out. It's not a nimitta, but it's a feeling. Almost a nimitta when it becomes so strong. It burst out. The mind was completely cool. Because he could accept the fact it's better for her to meditate in the room. But he couldn't help it. So he get angry from one anger grew to another anger. And so, and he completely disappeared. He's like a completely different person. And so we see the difference in Citta Vipassana. And it has psychotherapeutic healing. I'll give you another example. This fellow, this young man, he was always frightened when he goes to sleep. No. He has nightmares and has fear when he goes to sleep. So he tries to practice watching fear. It reduces, but it won't go away. It recurs. So I told him, give him the instruction. When next time the fear arises, you watch your consciousness, not watch the fear. The fear is that you let the fear be, but you just watch the mind and see all the interconnections that come with the mind. So when you watch, keep the mind just knowing the mind, and keep us mindful of just the mind. Consciousness as consciousness. The fear comes and goes there. Never mind. You just watch and you look for all the other causes surrounding it. Because not one cause. Then you know what happened. You trace the origin of it. And after that, it doesn't happen. He said, what's the origin? Oh, he says, his mind went back to the past. Because he said, when he was young, he used to like to see horror movies, like ghost stories, Dracula, things like that, And because he likes it, but he's frightened since young. So he fomented that thing in the mind, fear in the mind when he sleeps. So when he noticed that connection and he sees it as it doesn't have any good rationality or foundation behind it, it disappears instantly. There's another also dramatic case. This person I knew. Now what happens was, he's a smart chap, but he has a strong migraine. Migraines have a cause, but sometimes they've forgotten the cause. So what happens? He got to meditate, always has a migraine. So one day he came for a longer period. He became a temporary monk for 2 or 3 months, And so meditate, so I teaching. So what happened is, again, I tell him to watch the mind. So you say, don't run away from it, just watch the mind, don't care about the pain so much in the head. Just watch the mind. That means to keep your mind peaceful, clear, calm. Just hold the mind in peaceful and calm and watch what's happening in the mind. Again, the same situation. This one is 10 years now, until he couldn't study anymore. He couldn't go to college anymore. It was too strong. What happened? The cause, he traced back the cause, which I has forgotten altogether. And what was the cause? Puppy love. You know, puppy love. When you're young and you're a teenager, you fall in love. You know the one. I mean, it doesn't happen to you. Did it happen to you, David? Yeah? Of course, Italy, of course. You know. So it's always amore, always love. From the first day until before they die, is amore. So what happens was he fell in love with a girl and he was rejected. He was rejected. So of course he's a Buddhist, he used, even that time he was already a Buddhist, no? He used reasoning well, everything nonsense, blah, 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 blah. And he was able to sweep it under the carpet. But it's there bugging him. Why? No? So it has developed until the point it developed into a migraine, strong migraine. So when he recognized that, instantly it disappeared. Those 10 over years of migraine disappeared in an instant. Can you imagine? Amazing, I think. So this is the difference between watching the consciousness. Because you watch the consciousness, you're on the peak of the mountain. When you're on the peak of the mountain, you see everything around you. Yeah? That is, you see all the causes and conditions surrounding the mountain. That means you watch the consciousness as consciousness, not just the angry consciousness or the fearful consciousness, but go right to the consciousness and you see all the conditions around it. I think we continue this talk tomorrow. It's getting late. Sorry, 2015. Otherwise, by the time we go to Metta, I'll be falling asleep. You allow one or two questions. Yes, yes.
I'm just curious. So, is the consciousness clearer if we are using the cloud method compared to?
Is the consciousness clear the cloud method or the digital method? Either way it is possible. I wouldn't say one is clearer than the other. In terms of its conditions or its connections, the cloud would be clearer. In terms of its consciousness as a primary object and changing moment to moment, the digital method clearer. But you see, when you come to this cloud and digital method, coming to consciousness, you're talking of different experience now. It's not like the rising and falling anymore. The cloud and the digital is not rising and falling anymore. The cloud method in the conscious Chitanavasa is like watching many consciousness at the same time. Not saying you are is like. Whereas the other one is watching one consciousness. A singular consciousness. I wouldn't like to say one. Singular, concentrated awareness. We talk about this. If we finish talking about Chittanupasana according to Satipatthana, And then I will bring up the experiential Chittanupassana. Right? Okay. Yes.
In the consciousness, watches a consciousness. Is there another consciousness watch the consciousness watch consciousness?
There's a watching of the consciousness, and there's a process that follows it. The different processes. For example, the mind watches rising falling. There's a consciousness, mindfulness watching the rising falling. Now there can be a consciousness, thought processes after it knows that you are watching the rising falling. Okay? Understand? See what happens. Very long, I tell you, I always tell this example because it's one of the things that made me want to be a monk. No, beyond Malaysia, Chinese is basically quite materialist. Pray to get help from the devas. So what happens is one day I was learning from the Zen. So what happened while I was doing chanting. I did the old Mahanis chanting. Namo观世音菩萨, Namo观世音菩萨, there was one that the monk taught me, so I do like that. So when I was doing that chanting, Namo观世音菩萨, then it occurred to me, the bright idea came to me. What are you doing? The mind was talking to me. You're like a parrot. You're chanting, you are no better than a parrot chanting, schooling me. I said, my goodness. I'm a parrot, not a parrot. I don't want to be a parrot. So what happens is, why do I watch myself chanting? I started to play games. So I'm watching myself chanting. I was still chanting, watching. So it's a different thought process, watching. So this is only one step. That means I'm seeing more detached to myself chanting. The eye is put aside. It's watch outside. It's no longer in the mind. It's watch outside. I thought, well, this is interesting. I started playing games. Then I said, why don't I watch myself chanting? So I take another step back. So when I watch myself chanting, there was a big cut in my consciousness, like a lightning struck my head. And after that, what happened? Then I could see what happens. I could see that my consciousness, from what I remember now, streams of many consciousness and objects rushing by like a fast stream. I said, this is very interesting. I actually saw the consciousness disappearing in the whole process of objects. Of course, at that time, I don't know what actually happened. I just know something great happened. Something very interesting happened. Later, when I went into Vipassana, because Zen, they don't explain too much things to you. So, and secondly, they can't explain too much to me because my Mandarin and Chinese is quite this case. And Zen and Mahayana Buddhism is all Chinese, simple language. And so when I went to Vipassana and I get Vipassana experience, then I understood what actually happened. And then, of course, that's the big curiosity in me. I got to get to the bottom of this. so I started, trying out becoming a monk and all those things. So you see, it's watching consciousness. Even from the very start of doing Vipassana, to some people, I was watching rising, falling. Then my Thai teacher is a Vipassana teacher, Mahasi method, good old Mahasi method. I started with Mahasi and I'll end up with Mahasi. So one day he came to me and asked me, what are you watching? Watching rising and falling. What else? You asked me to watch rising falling, so I watch rising falling. And look at me. You're watching your mind. Is it so? And look again. Oh yeah, I saw my mind there. You know, when I saw my mind there, the vipassana in terms of the Theravada Mahasi method started. Because I saw the mind and the object together. When I watched the rising falling, I could see my mind and object going up and down in pairs. That makes a difference. I'm not saying Zen is no, okay. I would say that Vipassana is also found in Zen. But here is very systematic. Because the structure of Mahasi method is very, when that teachers commented, you see, there are many ways of practicing Vipassana, or so-called Vipassana, because in Thailand there are many ways as well. But the Mahasi method has a firm, well-grounded structure. So when I went in, it was beautiful for me because I was used to this British education. British education is very systematic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all categorized and everything, grammar, pronoun, and everything. Whereas Zen is you completely throw away all the structures and just go straight into what you experience. That was a bit too much for me because I was used to structure. And so once I went there, very easy for me, one step after another. All the instructions are well structured. So it was great for me because I saw all the ladders, rungs of the ladders. So it all started with actually watching the consciousness with the object. For me. And after that, I went to experience the second insight conditioning. People now argue about all this second insight knowledge, what it is, and now I want it. By watching this method, you can go straight into the second insight. Okay, I already spoken too much. 8:30, so we come a bit later. 8:30, 8:40, give 50 minutes at least.